Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we explore the resilience of the human spirit and the power of compassion to transform lives. Today, we bring you the heart-wrenching yet inspiring journey of two sisters, Kara and Jamie, who faced unimaginable challenges but found hope, love, and healing in the unlikeliest of places. Stay with us as we dive into their story, a testament to courage and the strength of community. Kara and Jamie, twin sisters aged only 11, lived a life far removed from the laughter and carefree adventures that should define childhood. Lincoln Park, a sprawling patch of green in the midst of the bustling city, was their refuge and prison. By day, the park was a haven for joggers and families, its benches warm under the sun, and the sound of children's laughter ringing through the air. By night, it became a harsh wilderness, shadowed by towering oaks and scattered lampposts that flickered unreliably. It was here, under the vast expanse of the night sky, that the sisters huddled together, their makeshift shelter no more than a worn blanket strung between two benches. The twins moved like shadows, unseen and unheard by most. Their survival was a delicate dance of invisibility and resilience. Kara, the older of the two by mere minutes, was the protector. Her dark eyes, too sharp and calculating for her age, scanned the park for any sign of trouble. Her small frame, hardened by the trials of the street, carried a dull knife she'd found behind a restaurant. Jamie, softer and quieter, followed her sister's lead with a map she clung to like a lifeline, torn and coffee-stained. The map was a relic of dreams they dared to whisper about, dreams of finding a place called Palm Springs, where palm trees swayed in the breeze, and the sun always shone. Their story began long before Lincoln Park became their home. The fire that took their parents left scars no one could see, but that weighed heavily on their small shoulders. The foster system had promised safety, but delivered despair. Every placement brought new challenges: overcrowded homes, empty cupboards, and foster parents who saw them as paychecks rather than children. When their final home turned dangerous, when their foster father's rage turned physical, they ran, with nothing but each other. They chose the uncertainty of the streets over the certainty of harm. On one particularly cold evening, Officer Michael Daniels began his routine patrol through Lincoln Park. The officer, a tall man with kind yet weary eyes, carried his own burdens, a photograph on his dashboard, a picture of his daughter Kira, forever frozen at age 10, reminded him of the life he had lost. Guilt clung to him like a second skin, a constant weight he carried since the accident that had taken her. Nights like this were the hardest, the stillness of the city amplifying his memories. As his flashlight cut through the shadows of the park, it illuminated more than he expected. Behind a bench, he caught sight of movement, too deliberate to be the wind. Two small figures, huddled together, froze in the beam. Their eyes, wide and fearful, reflected the light like startled animals. "Hello there," Daniels called softly, his voice steady but warm. "I'm Officer Daniels. Are you okay?" Kara sprang to her feet, positioning herself protectively in front of Jamie. The dull knife trembled in her grip, but her stance was fierce. "We're fine," she snapped, her voice sharp but wavering. "Leave us alone." Daniels knelt to the ground, lowering his flashlight and raising his empty hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently. "I just want to make sure you're safe." His gaze took in the scene, the thin blanket stretched between benches, the pile of food wrappers, the careful arrangement of branches forming a crude barrier. His chest tightened. They were just children. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, keeping his tone light. "That's none of your business." Kara shot back, her grip on the knife tightening. Behind her, Jamie clutched her map closer, her eyes darting between her sister and the officer. Daniels nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "You don't have to tell me anything. But it's getting colder tonight, and I'm worried about you." The twins remained silent, their tension palpable. After a long moment, Daniel stood, his movements careful and deliberate. I'm going to leave now, he said, stepping back. But I want you to know you're not alone. As he walked away, the weight of their situation pressed heavily on him. In his years on the force, he had seen much broken families, desperate choices, but this was different. These girls weren't just surviving. They were fighting for their lives in a world that had already failed them. That night, under the stars that peered through the branches, Kara and Jamie whispered to each other, "Do you think we'll ever have a real home again?" Jamie asked, her voice barely audible. Kara hesitated, staring at the stars above them. She wanted to promise her sister the world, but felt the crushing weight of their reality. "Yeah," she said finally, her voice soft but determined. "We will. I promise." The following evening, Daniels returned. This time, he brought a thick blanket and a thermos of hot chocolate. Still steaming, he approached slowly, setting the items on the ground near their makeshift camp. "Thought you might be cold," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach them. Kara watched him warily, her hand close to her knife, while Jamie peered around her sister with growing curiosity. The smell of the hot chocolate wafted toward them, rich and inviting. Daniel sat on a nearby bench, keeping his distance. He began to speak, sharing stories of his own childhood, of climbing trees and getting stuck, of the daughter he had lost. His voice was steady, unthreatening, filling the silence with warmth. Jamie's curiosity got the better of her. She reached for the thermos, only for Kara to pull her hand back. "We can't trust him," Kara whispered. But even as they retreated back to their blanket, Kara's gaze lingered on the supplies he had left. For the first time in a long time, the thought crossed her mind, maybe not everyone in the world was dangerous. The trust officer Daniel sought from Kara and Jamie did not come easily. Days turned into weeks as he continued his nightly visits to Lincoln Park. Each evening, he brought something small, a warm meal, an extra blanket, or a story about his daughter. Kira, slowly, the walls the twins had built around themselves began to crack, though Kara's fierce protectiveness rarely wavered. Jamie, however, had started to ask timid questions. Her quiet curiosity revealed a yearning for safety that her older sister struggled to allow herself to feel. One cold evening, Daniels arrived to find the twins huddled together over an old, singed journal. The edges were blackened, the pages brittle, but Jamie held it with reverence. When Daniels asked about it, Kara's eyes narrowed in suspicion, but Jamie hesitated. "It was our mom's," she said softly, her fingers tracing the faint handwriting. Daniels, sensing the delicate moment, crouched down to their level. "Do you mind if I look?" he asked. Kara glared at him, but reluctantly nodded, keeping her knife in sight as Jamie handed over the journal. As Daniels flipped through the pages, he saw notes written in hurried, desperate handwriting. Entries spoke of a man named Gerald King, a friend who had become a threat. One passage sent chills down his spine. "He's demanding we sell the property. If we don't, he'll make us pay. I don't trust him. I don't feel safe. I need to protect the girls." Daniels handed the journal back with shaking hands, his mind racing. This wasn't just a story of poverty and misfortune. This was a family torn apart by someone dangerous. "What else do you know about King?" Daniels asked cautiously. Kara's jaw tightened. "He was our foster father," she said bitterly. "He made our lives hell. When we ran away, he said he'd find us. He said he had friends everywhere." Jamie's voice broke in, trembling. "Mom used to write in the journal late at night. She'd hide it under the floorboards. I think she knew something bad was going to happen." The pieces began to form a troubling picture in Daniel's mind. Gerald King wasn't just an abusive foster parent. He was a man with connections to something much darker. Daniels reached out to an old friend, Emily Harper, a social worker who had once lived on the streets herself. When he described the twins and their story, her face grew grim. These kids aren't just running from poverty. They're running from someone powerful. If King is involved, they're in more danger than you realize. Emily agreed to help, but trust was not easily earned. The first time she approached the twins, Kara immediately stepped between her and Jamie, her knife flashing in the dim light. Emily raised her hands in surrender, her tone calm and steady. "I've been where you are," she said. I lived on the streets for 3 years. I know what it's like to feel like the world's out to get you. For the first time, Kara hesitated. The recognition in Emily's eyes, the shared experience, made her lower the knife slightly. Emily didn't press further. Instead, she left behind 2 sandwiches and quietly walked away, knowing it would take time, while Daniels and Emily worked to piece together the story. The twins grew more comfortable with their nightly visitors. Jamie showed Emily the journal, pointing to specific passages that hinted at a mysterious safe place their mother had mentioned. She said if something ever happened, we should go here, Jamie explained, tracing a map drawn in the margins. The clues led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Daniels, Emily, and the twins ventured inside one moonless night, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with dust, the floorboards creaking under their weight. In the center of the room, they found a small metal hatch, hidden beneath a stack of crates. Inside the hatch was a leather-bound photo album, a brass key, and an envelope addressed to my children. Jamie opened the letter with trembling hands and began to read aloud. If you're reading this, I couldn't protect you the way I wanted. Gerald King is not who he seems. He's dangerous, and he'll stop at nothing to get what he wants. Keep the journal safe. It's the only proof of what he's done. Trust no one but yourselves. And remember, you're stronger together. Jamie's voice cracked on the last words, tears streaming down her face. Kara reached for the brass key, her fingers gripping it tightly. We need to find out what this opens, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. But their discovery had not gone unnoticed. As they exited the warehouse, a black van screeched to a halt in the alley. Several men in dark clothing emerged, their faces hard and determined. Give us the journal, one of them demanded. Kara's instincts took over. Run, she screamed, grabbing Jamie's hand. The twins bolted into the night, Daniels and Emily close behind. The chase led them through narrow alleys and darkened streets. The twins' small frames gave them an advantage, slipping through spaces their pursuers couldn't navigate. At one point, Jamie stumbled, clutching the journal to her chest. Kara pulled her to her feet, whispering fiercely, "We stick together, no matter what." Finally, they found refuge in an abandoned church. Daniels quickly barred the doors. His knuckles scraped from an earlier scuffle. Inside, the group huddled together, their breathing ragged. Emily turned to the twins, her voice firm but gentle. "This isn't just about you anymore. What your mother left behind, it could take down King for good. But we need to be smart about this." Kara looked at the journal in Jamie's trembling hands. The weight of their mother's words, of the brass key, of the danger they faced, pressed down on her. "Then we fight," she said, her voice resolute. "For her. For us." Daniels nodded, his eyes filled with a determination that mirrored Kara's. "We'll protect you," he said, "and we'll make sure King can never hurt anyone else again." As the first rays of dawn broke through the church's stained glass windows, the group knew the fight was far from over. But together, they had found something stronger than fear: hope. The days that followed were a blur of plans and tension. The brass key they'd found in the warehouse was traced to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Officer Daniels and Emily Harper decided to investigate while Kara and Jamie stayed at a secure shelter that Emily had arranged. The shelter, Bright Horizons, was unlike anything the twins had experienced. A quiet room, real beds, warm meals, and staff with kind smiles. Still, Kara's distrust lingered. She kept watch over Jamie, always on edge, even as her sister began to show the first signs of comfort. At the bank, Daniels and Emily opened the safety deposit box. Inside, they found a treasure trove of evidence: financial records, incriminating correspondence, and photographs tying Gerald King to organized crime, extortion, and arson. Among the documents was a chilling letter: "If you don't comply, your family will pay the price." Signed, G. King. The proof was overwhelming. That evening, back at the shelter, Jamie sat cross-legged on her bed, flipping through the photo album they had recovered. The images showed a time before their lives were torn apart, birthday parties, a Christmas tree, their mother braiding their hair. Jamie traced the faces in the pictures, her eyes misty. "Do you think they'd be proud of us?" Jamie asked softly, her voice breaking the silence in the room. Kara, sitting on the edge of her bed, hesitated before answering. "I know they would," she said firmly, though her voice wavered. "They'd want us to fight for what's right." The fight came sooner than expected. One night, the shelter's alarms blared as headlights flooded the courtyard. A black van skidded to a halt, and men in dark clothing emerged, shouting demands for the journal. Daniels and Emily, who were staying nearby, arrived just in time. Daniels drew his weapon, his voice booming with authority. "Step away." The men hesitated but quickly retreated, disappearing into the night. Kara and Jamie, shaken but unhurt, realized the gravity of their situation. "He's not going to stop," Kara whispered, clutching the journal tightly. "We have to end this." The evidence from the safety deposit box was turned over to authorities, and Gerald King was arrested. The trial that followed captivated the city. Victor Ramos, a former associate of King, took the stand and detailed years of criminal activity. His testimony was damning, corroborating the evidence Daniels and Emily had found. In the gallery, Kara and Jamie sat between Daniels and Emily, their hands clasped tightly together. The prosecutor played the recording from their mother, her voice trembling but resolute. "If you're hearing this, something has happened to me. Gerald King is dangerous, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants. Protect my girls. Keep the journal safe." Jamie buried her face in Kara's shoulder, tears streaming down her face. Kara's grip on her hand tightened as she whispered, "We're doing this for her." Expert witnesses testified about the fire that had killed the girls' parents, confirming that it was no accident. Accelerants had been found, and the fire had been deliberately set. King's arrogance cracked under the weight of the evidence. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering their verdict. Guilty on all counts. King was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As the judge announced the sentence, Kara and Jamie leaned into each other, tears of relief and grief spilling freely. Daniels placed a gentle hand on their shoulders. "Your parents would be so proud of you," he said softly. The trial's conclusion marked a turning point, but healing was a process that could not be rushed. Daniels formally applied for guardianship of the twins, a process that took months of legal proceedings and home studies. In the meantime, he became a constant presence in their lives. Kara found solace in boxing, a skill Daniels taught her in his garage-turned gym. The physical activity allowed her to channel her anger and fear into strength. Daniels stood by with encouragement, calling out, "Keep your guard up. Kara, you're stronger than you think." Jamie discovered her passion for writing, encouraged by Emily, who gifted her a leather-bound notebook. Her stories, rooted in their experiences but filled with hope, became a form of therapy. One of her pieces, "Through the Shadows," caught the attention of a local literary contest, which she won. Elena, ever the advocate, launched a program inspired by the twin story called Safe Horizons. The initiative provided emergency shelters, legal advocacy, and educational resources for vulnerable children. Kara and Jamie became ambassadors for the program, sharing their story at events to raise awareness. One evening, the twins visited Lincoln Park for the first time since their ordeal. The once intimidating space now felt smaller, less daunting. They stood by the bench where Daniels had first found them. Kara placed a small bouquet of flowers at its base, saying softly, "Mom would have liked these." Jamie added, "Do you think she knew this is how it would turn out?" Kara took a deep breath, her voice steady. "I think she hoped we'd find our way." And we did. Months later, Daniel's guardianship was finalized. At the ceremony, the judge smiled warmly as she said, "Mr. Daniels, it's clear you've already been a father to these girls in every way that matters." That evening, the three of them shared their first meal as an official family. Jamie read aloud one of her stories, her words painting vivid pictures of their journey. When she finished, Kara leaned back in her chair and said with a rare smile, "It's about time someone told our story." Daniels, tears in his eyes, replied, "It's just the beginning. Their new life was not without challenges. But for the first time, it was filled with hope. The twins, once fragile and scared, had grown into strong, resilient young women. Together with Daniels and Emily, they turned their pain into purpose, proving that even in the darkest times, love, courage, and community could light the way forward. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Kara and Jamie's incredible story. Their resilience reminds us of the profound impact empathy and kindness can have in even the darkest moments. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more inspiring tales of courage and transformation. Let's continue spreading hope, one story at a time. Until next time, take care and remember, the smallest act of kindness can change a life.